Prayer is a technical act. It's not a feeling. It's not an expression of faith. It's not a conversation with a being who may or may not be listening. It's a technical act, which means it has specific conditions under which it works and specific conditions under which it doesn't. And most people, including most people who pray regularly, have never been told what those conditions are. What I want to do today is look at what prayer actually is mechanically, structurally, and why the same practice in two different people produces completely different results. Not because one believes harder or deserves more, because one is operating technology correctly and one isn't. That's not a judgment, it's a description of how any precise tool works. A compass functions the same way regardless of who holds it, but it only gives you accurate direction if you know how to use it. The Sufi tradition is the most technically precise framework I found for understanding what prayer does. Not prayer as petition, asking for things, but prayer as alignment. The Arabic word salat, which is usually translated as prayer, comes from a root that means connection, a joining of circuits. The act of prayer in the Sufi understanding is the act of aligning the individual intelligence with a larger intelligence, orienting toward al-haq, the real, in a way that makes transmission possible. Transmission in both directions, not just receiving, sending. What you bring into alignment with the real becomes available to it. What is available to it becomes available to you. The practice is the condition under which that exchange can happen cleanly. The Sufi masters drew a distinction that I think is the most useful single concept for understanding why practice produces such inconsistent results across people. The distinction is between hal and makam. A hal is a state of being. It's an experience that arrives, sometimes during practice, sometimes unexpectedly, of clarity, openness, presence, what some people call grace. It's real, it's valuable, but it passes. You can't hold it. You can't produce it on demand. It comes and goes independently of your effort. A makam is a station. It's a permanent change in the ground of who you are. It's not an experience you have, a level you reach and don't fall back from. The Sufi path is specifically organized around the acquisition of makamat, which is stations as a plural word, through sustained practice over time, not the accumulation of um, experiences, but the permanent alteration of the person doing the practicing. Most contemporary spiritual practice is organized entirely around producing hal, the state, the retreat that opens something, the meditation that brings peace, the prayer session that feels alive. These are real and they matter, of course, but they are like the weather. A makam, on the other hand, is a change in the ground itself, and the conditions that produce one are not the same as the conditions that produce the other. Here's what I've watched happen across people who practice with different levels of understanding of this distinction. Someone who's practicing to produce hal, the state, to feel something, to have an experience, to access a state of peace or clarity, will practice when they feel moved to and stop when they don't. The practice is organized around the experience it produces. When the experience is good, they practice more. When it feels dry or mechanical, they pull back and look for a different method or question whether the practice is working. This is almost universal in modern spiritual culture and it produces real experiences, but it doesn't build makam because makam is built precisely in the dry periods. That's when it really matters. It's in the practice that continues when nothing is being felt, when there is no hal present, when the act is purely structural. That is when the ground changes, not when the weather is good. Natural law makes the same point without any spiritual language. A tree doesn't grow only when conditions feel optimal. It grows continuously, including through seasons that feel like nothing is happening. The growth during winter, the consolidation underground, the dormancy that is actually preparation is as essential as the visible growth of spring. A practice that only runs when the season feels right will never build a root system that produces real fruit. Numerology adds a specific dimension here. The life path 4 is a frequency built on structure, sequence, and the long game. It doesn't produce fast results in work, in relationships, or in practice. But what it builds, when it builds correctly, has a solidity that other frequencies do not produce. The 4 is specifically designed to operate through sustained, disciplined repetition over time. For someone running this frequency, the dry periods in practice aren't a sign of failure. They are the specific condition under which the 4 builds its most durable work. The zikr, the Sufi practice of repetitive remembrance, the repetition of divine names or phrases, is built on exactly this understanding. The practice isn't designed to feel transcendent every time. It's designed to be repeated so consistently across so many conditions that the repetition itself restructures the practitioner at a level below conscious experience. The how state may come and go. The makam accumulates regardless, provided the practice continues, of course. The heart is like a mirror. Prayer is the act of polishing it. You don't polish a mirror once. You polish it until the surface holds what stands before it without distortion. This is traditional Sufi teaching. So what actually shifts when someone understands practice as a technology for building makam rather than producing hal? The first shift is in the relationship with consistency. When practice is organized around experience, consistency is hard to maintain because experience is inconsistent by nature. Some days it's alive and some days it isn't. If the measure of a good practice session is how it felt, then a session that felt flat reads as failure. Most people give up somewhere in that cycle. When practice is understood as structural, as an act of polishing something that will eventually hold a clearer reflection, regardless of how any individual session feels, consistency becomes easier to maintain. not because the dry periods disappear, but because they stop being evidence that something has gone wrong. They're part of the process. It's expected, required even. The second shift is in what the practice is actually for. Most people approach prayer as a way of getting something, whether it's peace, clarity, guidance, relief, prosperity. Those things can come through practice, but they're byproducts, not mechanism. The mechanism is alignment. The function is the ongoing correction of orientation toward what's real. When that correction is made regularly enough, over time, the quality of information available to a person changes. The decisions they make come from a cleaner source. The perception available to them is less filtered by the noise of unexamined assumption. This is what the traditions mean when they talk about prayer as protection, not protection from external events, but from consequences, from difficulty, from loss, protection from the specific kind of disorientation that comes from living out of contact with what's real. A person in genuine alignment makes fewer decisions that cost them in ways they didn't anticipate. And this is not because they're lucky, because they're reading more accurately. The third shift is the most practical. When practice is understood as technology, it becomes possible to evaluate it honestly. Is this practice building makam or only half? Is the ground actually changing or am I having experiences and returning to the same person? Those are answerable questions. They require honesty and time and the willingness to look at the actual evidence of life rather than the quality of individual sessions. But they are answerable, and that makes practice something that can be refined, not just repeated. The question isn't whether your practice feels alive. The question is whether it's changing the ground. Those are different measures, and only one of them tells you whether the technology is working. I'll see you next time.